Hi, I'm George Pearson, and this is my review of Luminar 2018, which is an image processing program kind of similar to Adobe's Lightroom. Now, if you enjoy this video, make sure you click that like button and also share with your friends. Subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all of my new videos. And if you want to learn a lot more about the training that I have, you'll find links for that up there in the upper right-hand corner. All right, let's get to it. Luminar is a photo processing, post-processing program kind of similar to Adobe's Lightroom program, or if you're looking at Photoshop Elements, it's kind of similar to the Enhance menu, some of the options in the Enhance menu. Let's just first walk through. I'll show you what this program can do, and then I'll talk about how it compares to other programs. Let's just open an image right here, and I'll just grab one of these samples that I use on my training all the time. I think I'll grab this one right there. That's kind of fun. We'll open that one up. Now, one thing about Luminar is it doesn't run as quickly as the Adobe programs run. So if you're used to images loading very quickly, it doesn't happen here in Luminar. It's not as fast as the Adobe programs. But aside from that, it still seems to be just as feature-rich for what it does. Now, we can see already the differences in here and some of the power of the Luminar program, and that is the thumbnails down here across the bottom. Now, these are different kinds of adjustments that are set up in predefined settings. Over here, right-hand side, we have filters. There's a little histogram up here. You can use layers a little bit. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. We'll start off by just grabbing one of these. I'll just do this classic black and white, which is right here. Click on that. That loads in a bunch of presets over here on the filters on the right-hand side. Now, the preset section over here, the filters on the right-hand side, little slider bar right there. This is very much like what you would see over in Adobe's Lightroom program, or possibly if you're using different settings in Photoshop or Photoshop Elements for controlling things such as luminance or saturation, exposure, contrast, your basic slider control stuff, and divide it up into color channels. All pretty straightforward. And again, this you'll find in most any program. But the interesting part here about Luminar is this ability to have these filters and these sets down here which pre-apply these settings. Now, right on the preset button over here and at the bottom of the panel on the right-hand side, there's a little thing here that says filters amount. This is something which is kind of interesting. It actually allows you to adjust the amount of the filters being applied onto your image. So right here I changed this down to a 66%. Gives me kind of a washed out, colorized, kind of an old-fashioned look on that, as if it's a faded photograph. Notice all of these settings stay the same, and then I'm simply combining or merging this with the previous image using that additional control. That's kind of a fun little tool in here. Also up here at the top, there are two buttons right there. Left one allows you to click on that and go between your original and your adjusted image. The right one gives you your before and after with this slider. You can actually pull this back and forth and see how the image changes with and without that filter applied to it. So a real nice, interesting feature here while you're working allows you to very quickly do a comparison check on your image. You can toggle between that on or off right here and then show or hide. Just kind of click and hold like that. Now, some of the other tools across the top up here, we have a zoom, fit to screen, and then specific settings, or zoom in, zoom out options right there. We don't have a toolbar on the left-hand side with a zoom tool, but that's sitting right here. Over here we have our undo option. It'll back you up a step just like that. Notice there is no redo on this, no redo button, but under the edit menu we have undo and redo right there with your standard keyboard controls. Just to the right of that we have the history. Now the history is your undo and your redo. If I click back up here on history, this goes back to that setting which we're just playing with. So you do have undo and redo very easily accessible right there. Next there's a tools. There's not much in here in the way of tools. Crop, standard cropping tool for cropping into your image. Nothing unusual about that. There's a clone and stamp and erase tools. but I haven't found that these are really that great, so I tend to stay away from these two tools. You'll find much better clone and stamp and erasing using a program like Photoshop or Adobe's Photoshop Elements, where you have much more control over that kind of processing work. So I don't really recommend this program for this. This will work, in a pinch. If this is all you have, these will work, but they're very limited on what they can do. On the right-hand side, we have three basic panels in here. The top one is your histogram. Right now we're looking at a black and white image, so we're seeing it as black and white. You can show or hide that with that button right there. Below that we have layers. Now these are very limited layers. These are not like layers that you have over in Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Photoshop Elements. We have just three kinds of layers here. Add new adjustment layer. Now this is a standard adjustment layer. It allows you to take one of your layers down here, one of your filter presets, and have that applied as an adjustment layer, which is a nice way to separate out your adjustments from your preset. It also allows you to easily use different presets on the same image and then switch between them by showing or hiding layers. You can add a new image layer. What this does is it brings in another image on top of this image as a separate layer, allowing you to do some basic blending between the two images. Again, it's not very advanced on that. You can do a few things, but you can't get anywhere near the kind of abilities you have in Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Photoshop Elements. You also can make a stamp layer, and again, this doesn't give you anywhere near the capabilities of those Adobe programs. So these really, in my opinion, are not that useful. But the adjustment layer is a nice way to work with your adjustments so you can keep your original image clean and then have your adjustment on a separate layer. You can show or hide the layers right there, little show or hide. Below that we have our filters in here, and these are all the presets based depending upon which preset you're choosing from down below here on the little preset below panel. If I open this up to custom workspace, we have quite a few in here. Professional, quick and awesome, essentials, aerial photography, just some basic preset filter sets that will come in here and set up this workspace with the filters that match that. Now notice if I close this down, I'm only seeing the black and white conversion filters right now because that's all I used over here on this one preset. If we go over here and change to professional, we now have develop, denoise. If I scroll down here, you can see a few more of these. Saturation, vibrance. We have a lot more filters sets available, filter adjustments available in here, including a nice curves control right there. So there are a lot of adjustments available. Again, very similar to the Adobe Lightroom program over here on the right hand side. Now on the bottom sets, there's a few things you can do with this. Again, this is a real easy way to work with this. Simply click on a set. It brings in those settings for your filters on the right hand side. You can adjust the amount of filtration right here, kind of blend that in or not. There's a little star down here. You can add a setting into your favorites and then choose from your favorites if you find one that you use all the time. There are also several categories of these. Click on categories. We're looking at basic right now. There's also a dramatic category, outdoor category, portrait, street looks, travel, aerial inspired stuff. All of the presets, you can show everything down there if you want to all at one time. Favorites, this is what happens if you click on those little stars. They get added into the favorites section. You can set up custom presets. You also can get more presets online as well. Now the online presets, some of these are free, some of these are purchased sets. It's up to you on which way you want to go on that. Let's just click on the all, there it is, all presets. So here's the whole thing. Let's give it a second for it to load in all of the thumbnails. And again, as I mentioned before, this program is not as fast as the Adobe programs on some of those motions in there. But if I grab the slider here, if I can get my hand out, there we go. There are a lot of these preset filter settings that you can use. They're alphabetical right now for a very wide range of image quality adjustments. Here's our tonal compression. Let's go ahead and do that one. There it is, tonal compression, and again we can adjust the amount on this. We'll go back here to our basic and I'll grab a black and white on this one. See if we can get the slider control to work. At the bottom of my screen there, kind of hard to grab. And there it is. There's the black and white. Let's apply that filter again. There we are. Now up here upper right hand corner it says overlay preset. What this does is it takes this filter set and it applies that as a new layer. Let me just show you that. I'll bring the layers up again. little layer button right there. Right now here we're on the original layer. I'll just click on the overlay preset, and you'll see how we came in here with layer 1, or layer 0 rather, right there, a new layer. So here is our black and whites. There's our black and white preset as a new layer. Let's use the history here to back up out of that. Let's go back to our preset right there. Now another way to put in these is to use them on separate adjustment layers. Let me just back up one more step here before we did that one. Back to our tonal compressor. There it goes, right back to that full color image. Now, if I go over here to the layers, I can click on the little plus and add a new adjustment layer right here. There's the new adjustment layer. There it is. Go for the black and white now. I now can show or hide that preset right on that one layer. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility in here. When you're on these layers, there are some tools in here, a brush tool, gradient mask, radial mask, and luminosity mask, allowing you to do some very basic masking between this layer and the layer underneath. Now I found with the brush tool, it's not that great of a tool. You have very few controls on this. You can't really do real nice masking and so forth, so I tend to not like that. The gradient mask allows you to do a standard gradient or a radial gradient. Again, this kind of control here of blending two layers together is done much more successfully over in a program like Adobe Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, which is great at using layers and this kind of blending of layers. There is a luminosity mask which works out well. It takes this layer, takes the luminosity values from this, and then uses that to blend into the layer underneath. Let's just take a fast look at that one. There we go. See that the darkest areas are going black and white, and some of the lighter areas are going full color in here, so it does that. There are also some blending modes that you can get to in here as well with these layers. And you'll find those right here where it says normal. Click on that. And just some basic blend modes in here. And they work okay. They're not great. Again, they're not as feature rich as the blend modes we have over in an Adobe program, although they do work. So there you go. Again, this is just overlaying this layer onto this layer. But this is not really the strength of this particular program. The strength of this program is in the filters and your filter sets down below there. I'm going to just click on the layers here, and you can merge your layers together or merge your visible layers. So you can then combine everything into one final layer and then go back to working with your processing down below if you want to. So you have just a few options. You also can remove layers. Just click on your layer and click on the minus button. It removes that layer and, of course, all of the filter settings from that layer as well. So you have some flexibility in there with those layers. Now across the top up here, File menu, basic stuff. You can add in custom preset packs. There's the edit menu, of course. Your layers. This is the same as we were looking at over here on the layers menu. Basic filter sets in here. A few tools. Masking brush, gradient mask, radial mask. These are the same tools we saw over there on that layer. Crop, clone, stamp, and erase. Again, I don't really recommend using those. They're not very feature rich or powerful. There are better programs for this kind of more advanced work. It does allow you to do some masking, but the masking is not a great option here. Here's your window, your Skylum account in here. And of course they have a nice help section with some good video tutorials on how to use the program. So there it goes. That's a look then at what the Luminar program is all about, and its most powerful feature really is the thumbnail display down here at the bottom and these different categories of preset filter settings. So as a basic image processor, it's a real nice program, but it's not as feature rich with additional tools such as your masking tools, your layer combination tools. Things like that really should be done in a program that is designed for working with layers like Adobe Photoshop or for Adobe Photoshop Elements. Now, where this compares to Lightroom, it's very, very similar with your filters on the right-hand side to the Develop module inside of Lightroom. It doesn't have the additional modules like the Library Organizer or the Slideshow, some of those additional modules, but the Develop module is very similar in a lot of ways. But this does have again these nice thumbnails down below here. The main difference between Luminar and Photoshop Lightroom, and where you may prefer to go for Luminar instead of Lightroom, is that Luminar is a pay one and own it program. It's I think about $70 right now. You buy it and you own it. whereas in Lightroom, that's a subscription service. You either pay for it on a monthly or a yearly basis, but you have to keep on paying for it to keep on using it. And I know that's a very big deal for a lot of people. So if you want to have the abilities that you have over in Adobe's Lightroom program, but you don't want to be on a subscription basis, then this is a very good choice for you. I have no problem at all with their adjustments in here. The only other small problem here is that this program is working in RGB mode. It's an RGB mode program as opposed to a CMYK program. So if you need CMYK color space, you'll have to go for an Adobe program or some different program for that, as this is only working in RGB. But it's still pretty feature rich in that as well. Let's just go up here to File, come down to Export, and in here we can see the formats that it exports to. It has your JPEG, your PNG, your TIFF, Photoshop, and PDF. Notice that even if I go to Photoshop, which can be either RGB or CMYK, we only have the RGB options in here for that. So even though you can export to Photoshop, it only exports as an RGB color space. So there is that one limitation on that, is it's just the RGB. Again, not a big deal for most people, but if you're doing a lot of actual professional print work, then you may want to look at a different program that has that CMYK color space. One more interesting little feature about Luminar is that it actually can be installed as a plugin, which is kind of weird. It can be installed as a plugin inside of Adobe Photoshop or Photoshop Lightroom. So if you like using plugins and the $70 price isn't a big deal for you, to have this, you actually can install this as a plugin on those programs, which gives you the best of both worlds. You have all these real nice filter sets down here to use to kind of speed up your work and speed up your post-processing of your images, but then you still have the full control of the Adobe programs as well. Simply click on Install, and it installs just like any other program or plugin would. And the way that those work, you'll then go into your Photoshop or Lightroom, and you'll then click through into Luminar, do your adjustments, and will then put that image back into Photoshop or Lightroom, whichever one that you have your plugins installed to. So there you go. There's a look at Luminar, and this is the version 2018. And again, I like the program as far as the filter tools go over here. I really like these filter sets down below, these default settings. Really speeds up the process when you're doing this kind of creative work. The things I don't like about the program, I don't care for the layers. Aside from using just the adjustment layers, that's a nice way to separate out your adjustments for testing purposes. I found these other, these image layer adjustments, stamped layers, their masking tools up here, the crop, clone, stamp, erase. I found all of these really were less than satisfactory, especially when compared to more feature-rich programs like Photoshop or Photoshop Elements. So if what your concern is basic post-processing, this is a very nice choice and a very nice program for that. If your concern is more intense image manipulation, then even Adobe's Lightroom program wouldn't be satisfactory, and you'd want to get into Photoshop or Photoshop Elements for that kind of more massive control and optimization and working with and manipulating your images. Other little side issues that I found with Luminar, this has crashed a few times on me. So it seems to be not as stable as an Adobe program. It's not quite as fast and it's not quite as stable, but that's to be expected if it's a smaller company. Also, the program appears to have been built for the Macintosh primarily and then ported over to the PC, so possibly there wouldn't be these crashing issues on the Mac side. I'm testing this here on a PC, and that could be the issue with the crashing. But there it is. Again, I like the program. I find it's a lot of fun to use. I do like these sets down below here, filter sets down below. It's a really easy way to come in and control or adjust your basic settings. I like the fact that it's a straight out purchase program as opposed to a subscription based program like Adobe is using nowadays. And again, the downsides are some of the tools aren't as feature rich as they could be, but for the main tools that are included, the main tools you're working with, which is the filters, it's a very nice program. And you can find this on Skylum. Let me just bring that up here. Go up here to Help, and let's take a look at the About Luminar 2018. You'll find it there on Skylum.com. That's where you can get the Luminar program. One last little thing about the Luminar program, again, it's not that expensive. It's about $70 or so, is that you also can get a 2-week free trial. So you can play with it for 2 weeks, see if you like it, And if you do, you can then go ahead and upgrade your trial version to the full license version. So there you go. That's a look then at Luminar 2018. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you found it useful. If you like this video, click on the like button below to let others know. You can click the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos in the future. I'm frequently uploading new training videos. Don't forget to check out my website at howtogurus.com.